Please take
Irene
this.
stood at the
It will
corner of
cover
the high-end
everything.
shopping mall,
Thank you very
clutching the
much.
worn edges of her coat as she glanced nervously at the crowd. She had never been here before, never seen such wealth or such polished people. The scent of designer perfumes wafted through the air, mixing with the sound of high heels clicking against the marble floors. Her heart raced as she felt out of place, surrounded by people who didn't look like her, didn't come from her world. She had one mission today: to prove herself. The black card, the exclusive invitation, had been given to her and another woman by the billionaire himself. The challenge? To see who could prove their worth. It was a game of power, a game that she wasn't sure she even knew how to play. As she stood in the corner, feeling the weight of judgment from the crowd, she saw him, Mr. Gregory Harding, the billionaire who had created an empire built on luxury, status, and connections. He was tall, his silver hair combed neatly, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. He glanced briefly at Irene, then turned his attention to the two women standing next to him. They were both dressed in the latest fashion, their heels high, their smiles perfect. The competition was fierce, and Irene had to admit, she didn't stand a chance. She wasn't used to wealth, and she wasn't used to being the center of attention in a place like this. Yet, there was something in her, something deep down, that told her to stay. She wasn't going to back down. Not today. As the women began their part of the challenge, Irene watched, unsure of what her next move would be. But she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't here to compete with the others. She was here to survive. And that, more than anything, meant proving her worth in a world that often overlooked people like her. Gregory Harding noticed her again, this time with more curiosity than before. He hadn't expected her to be quiet and reserved. He expected something different. But Irene didn't show him what he wanted. She showed him something else: her heart. The women with their smiles and polished appearances had their moments, but Irene knew this was about more than just appearances. She was about to show him something that would change everything. Just then, something unexpected happened. The maid, who had been quietly serving in the background, stepped forward with a gentle, yet firm voice. Irene, the black card is not about money. It's about heart. Those words hit Gregory Harding like a bolt of lightning. The noise of the room faded, and all he could hear was the maid's voice. He looked at her in disbelief, and for the first time, he saw her, not just the maid, not just the person serving in the background, but someone with strength, with conviction. Something inside him shifted. He hadn't expected the maid to be the one who would change his perspective. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew about wealth, status, and power started to crumble. He now had to make a decision, one that would break his heart and change his life forever. Irene stood still as the chaos of the competition swirled around her. The two women, who had initially ignored her presence, now seemed to shine brighter in the spotlight. Their laughter, their flawless makeup, and their designer clothes had all been carefully crafted to impress. They laughed, whispered, and posed, their eyes never straying too far from Gregory Harding, who was still watching them intently. But Irene remained quiet. Her hands were trembling, and she felt the weight of the black card in her pocket as if it were a secret she wasn't sure how to keep. The whole thing felt like a game she didn't understand until now. She wasn't here for the spectacle, for the flashy moments, for the validation. She was here because she had no other choice. The maid's words echoed in her mind: the black card is not about money. It's about heart. Irene took a deep breath, letting the sound of it drown out the laughter around her. She was going to show him something that the others wouldn't. She was going to show Gregory Harding her truth. But first, she had to make sure she wasn't invisible. The other women were finishing their turns, their voices louder than ever, their gestures grander. But Gregory's eyes kept wandering back to Irene, and she could feel it. Her heart raced in her chest, and with every passing moment, she felt like her world was spinning faster. Irene, Gregory's voice broke through the noise. She hadn't realized he was standing next to her. He looked at her with an intensity that caught her off guard. "What are you waiting for?" he asked, his tone softer than she expected. "I'm waiting for the right moment," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves that gripped her insides. Gregory raised an eyebrow. "You think there's a right moment? This is your chance to prove something." Irene nodded slowly. I don't need to prove anything to you, she said, her words quiet but firm. But I do need to prove something to myself. She wasn't sure where the words came from, but as soon as she spoke them, she felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't playing his game. She was playing hers. A silence fell over them, and for a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. The world outside of them faded away. Irene could feel the heat of Gregory's gaze, but this time, she didn't flinch. She stood taller, her heart swelling with newfound resolve. I'm not here to compete, Irene continued, her eyes locking with Gregory's. I'm here to survive. And that's something you'll never understand. Gregory's lips parted, as if he was about to speak, but no words came out. The silence lingered, heavy, charged with the unspoken tension between them. Around them, the other women and the guests were still chatting, still moving through their rehearsed motions. But to Irene, it was as though the whole room had disappeared. The only thing left was Gregory Harding and the challenge he had set, a challenge that now seemed hollow compared to the weight of the moment she was living. Finally, Gregory spoke, his voice lower than before, a mixture of curiosity and respect. You're different, Irene, he said, almost as if he was still processing what she had said. Irene didn't respond right away. She wasn't sure how to respond. What could she say to a man who had been born into this world of wealth and power, a world that had always been closed off to her? She wasn't sure what Gregory saw in her, but in that moment, she could feel a shift. It wasn't about the black card anymore. It wasn't about the game or the competition. It was about something deeper, something unspoken. As the tension between them hung in the air, a voice broke the silence. It was the maid, the one who had watched from the sidelines. Irene hadn't noticed her until now. But there she was, standing just behind Gregory, her expression calm yet resolute. Sir, the maid said, her voice steady, what you've asked them to do isn't the test you think it is. The real test is not what they can buy or how they can dress. The real test is what they can give, without asking for anything in return. Gregory turned to look at the maid, surprise flickering in his eyes. And what do you know about this? He asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. The maid simply smiled, a small but knowing smile. I know more than you think, she said softly. And I know that you've already found your answer. The words hung in the air between them, like a puzzle that had been solved. Irene watched the exchange, feeling something shift inside her. The maid's words weren't just for Gregory, they were for her too. She had been caught in the whirlwind of competition, trying to prove herself, trying to fit into a world that didn't understand her. But the real test wasn't about winning or losing. It was about surviving. It was about knowing your worth, even when the world didn't see it. The room had grown quieter. The other women were now looking at the maid, and then at Irene, their expressions changing. Gregory, too, seemed to have realized something. He wasn't looking at her with the same skepticism anymore. Instead, he was looking at her with something else, something like respect. For the first time, Irene felt like she truly belonged. And for the first time, Gregory Harding had seen her not just as a challenge, but as a person. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this conversation, was about to change everything. Irene stood still, trying to process what had just happened. The maid's words had hit her harder than she expected. The real test was not about what they could buy or how they could dress. It was about what they could give without asking for anything in return. The thought lingered in her mind, growing heavier with each passing second. She had been so focused on proving her worth, on winning this game that Gregory Harding had set up. But now, in the midst of it all, she realized something important. This wasn't her game. It was his. And he wasn't the only one who needed to learn something. She wasn't going to play by the rules anymore. She wasn't here to prove herself to him. She was here to prove something to herself. Gregory's eyes softened as he glanced back at her. He wasn't looking at her with the same skepticism he had before. There was respect in his gaze now, but also curiosity. Irene couldn't help but notice the way he was watching her. For the first time, she felt seen. Not as a challenger, not as someone trying to fit into his world, but as someone who had her own worth, her own strength. The other women were still whispering among themselves, glancing at Irene with a mix of confusion and disbelief. They didn't understand what was happening. They didn't understand what she was doing. But she didn't care. She wasn't here for them. She was here for herself. The maid, who had been quietly observing from the side, stepped forward again. Her presence was calm, unwavering, as if she had seen this all before. She looked at Irene with a knowing smile. "You're doing the right thing," she said quietly. Irene nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and determination. She was doing the right thing. For once, she wasn't trying to be someone else. She wasn't trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for her. She was being herself. And that, in itself, was enough. Gregory watched the exchange with a growing sense of intrigue. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Irene to be the one to turn the tables. But now, he couldn't look away. There was something about her that was magnetic, something that made him rethink everything he thought he knew about success, about wealth, and about people like her. "Irene," he said, his voice softer now. "You're different. I see that now." Irene looked at him, her expression steady. "I'm not here to play your game, Gregory," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm here to make my own way." Gregory's lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something more, but the words seemed to get caught in his throat. He had never encountered someone like Irene before. She wasn't like the other women in the room. She wasn't trying to impress him or win his approval. She was simply being herself. And that was more powerful than anything he had ever seen. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Gregory said, finally. "But you've proven something to me today." Irene's heart skipped a beat. For the first time, she felt like she had done something that mattered. It wasn't about the black card. It wasn't about the competition. It was about who she was and what she stood for. As Gregory continued to look at her, she could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was starting to understand. He was starting to see her for who she truly was. And in that moment, she realized something else. This wasn't just about her proving herself to Gregory. This was about him learning to see beyond appearances, beyond the surface level of wealth and status. It was about him learning to value what really mattered. The room had fallen silent once again, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence of judgment or expectation. It was the kind of silence that came after something significant had been said, after a shift had occurred. Irene felt it, too. She wasn't just standing in a room full of strangers anymore. She was standing in front of someone who was starting to understand her, to see her as an equal. The other women, still processing what had just happened, watched from the sidelines. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. They had thought they were the ones who had it all figured out, who had the perfect lives, the perfect appearances. But Irene had shown them something they hadn't expected. She had shown them the power of being real. The maid, who had been standing quietly in the background, looked at Irene one last time. "You've got this," she said with a knowing smile. Irene smiled back, her heart full. She wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She wasn't just playing a game. She was living her truth. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all. Irene stood there, feeling the weight of the silence that had settled over the room. The other women were still stunned, trying to process what had just happened. They had expected a competition, a game they knew how to play. But Irene had changed the rules, and in doing so, she had made Gregory Harding question everything he thought he knew about worth, status, and power. He had been silent for a few moments, his gaze lingering on Irene as if he were trying to decipher something deep inside her. He wasn't the only one. Irene had come here to prove something, not just to Gregory, but to herself. But now that the moment had passed, she realized that this wasn't about winning a game or earning a card, it was about showing the world that she, too, had value. Gregory finally broke the silence, his voice softer than before. I didn't expect you to say that, Irene, he admitted, his words carrying a weight that wasn't there before. But I see it now. You're not like the others. Irene didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. The words had already been said, and the truth hung in the air like a heavy fog. The competition was over, and for the first time, Irene felt a sense of peace. She had come here expecting to fight for her place, but instead, she had found something far more valuable, self-respect. She had found the strength to be herself, without apology. I don't need to prove anything to you, Irene said quietly, her voice steady. I've already proved enough to myself. Gregory nodded slowly, as if he was finally starting to understand. You've proven more than enough, he replied, his tone sincere. And I admire that. More than you know. Irene felt a small spark of warmth in her chest. For once, she didn't feel like she was fighting to be seen, to be heard. She was seen. She was heard. And in that moment, that was enough. The maid, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward again. Her eyes met Irene's, and there was a shared understanding between them. The maid had known all along what Irene needed to learn. She had seen it from the beginning, there was no need to compete, to impress. The real strength was in simply being true to oneself. Gregory turned to the maid, his expression thoughtful. You were right, he said, his voice low. I see now. It's not about the black card, or the competition. It's about what people bring to the table, their hearts, their integrity, their courage. The maid smiled softly, nodding. Sometimes, the most valuable things aren't the ones you can buy, she said, her voice calm but firm. Irene felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She hadn't expected any of this. She had come into this situation unsure of herself, afraid that she didn't belong in a world like this. But now, as she stood there with Gregory and the maid, she realized that she had always belonged. It wasn't about the world accepting her, it was about accepting herself. Thank you, Irene said to the maid, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for showing me what really matters. The maid's smile widened, and for the first time, Irene saw her not just as a servant, but as an equal. You had it in you all along, the maid replied. You just had to believe it. Irene took a deep breath, letting the weight of those words sink in. She wasn't just part of this world, she was shaping it. The people around her, the ones who had judged her, had no idea what they had just witnessed. They hadn't seen her for who she truly was, but that didn't matter anymore. Gregory had seen her, and that was all that mattered. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was Irene, and she had proven something far more important than winning a black card or impressing anyone. She had proven that she could stand tall, that she could be proud of who she was, and that, in the end, that was all she needed. Gregory's gaze softened as he looked at her one last time. You've taught me something today, he said quietly. And I'll never forget it. Irene met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. She had never needed his approval, but hearing it now, from him, made all the difference. The competition was over. The black card, the game, the challenge, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the truth Irene had discovered about herself, and the lesson she had taught everyone in that room. It was a lesson that would stay with them long after they left, a lesson about heart, courage, and the power of being true to oneself. Irene walked out of the room with a feeling she had never experienced before. The competition was over, the black card no longer mattered. She had done something more than just win a challenge, she had found a piece of herself she never knew existed. The way Gregory Harding had looked at her, with newfound respect, had stirred something deep within her. It was as if the moment she had spent trying to belong had finally come to an end, and she was now standing on her own. The bustling noise of the event felt distant now. People moved around her, chatting, laughing, but Irene was lost in her thoughts. She had proved herself, not through money, not through appearances, but through her heart. She had stayed true to who she was. The maid's words kept echoing in her mind, the real test is not what they can buy, it's what they can give. That had been Irene's turning point. It wasn't about impressing anyone or fitting into a mold. It was about showing up as herself and standing tall in a world that often tried to shrink people like her. Gregory caught up with her just outside the door. "Irene," he called, his voice a little breathless. She turned to face him. He was still wearing that thoughtful expression, the one that told her he was processing everything that had happened. "I've been thinking," he started, his tone sincere. "You've taught me a lot today. More than you can imagine." Irene nodded, not needing to hear any more. She had already learned what she needed to from him. "I didn't do it for you," she replied, her voice calm but resolute. "I did it for me." Gregory took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her. "I know," he said quietly. "But you've also shown me what I've been missing in my life. I've been so focused on power and wealth that I forgot what really matters. I forgot about integrity, kindness, and heart." Irene couldn't help but soften at his words. She had spent so much of her life being overlooked, being told that her worth was tied to something external, like wealth or success. But Gregory had seen past that. He had seen her for who she truly was, not just as a test or a challenge, but as a person. "I didn't expect to learn this from you," Gregory continued, his voice still low. "But I've realized that true power is about lifting others up, not stepping on them to get ahead." Irene smiled, a small, knowing smile. It was the kind of smile that came from understanding. "Exactly," she said, her voice full of quiet confidence. "True power is in how we treat others, not in what we have." The silence between them was comfortable, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air like a shared secret. The world around them seemed to slow down, as if everything had come to a pause just for this moment. Gregory cleared his throat, as if breaking the spell. "I want to do something for you, Irene," he said. "I want to help you, not because you've earned it or because I feel guilty, but because you've earned it in a way I never expected." Irene looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. She wasn't sure what he meant, but she wasn't here for charity. She was here because she had earned her place. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady. Gregory hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "I've been thinking about what you said about surviving, about finding your own way. I want to help you do that, in any way I can." Irene felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had come into this situation feeling like an outsider, unsure of where she belonged. But now, it felt like she had finally found a space for herself. She wasn't just some test for Gregory or anyone else to measure up to. She was a person, worthy of respect, worthy of being seen. "I appreciate it, Gregory," Irene said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "But I don't need your help to prove my worth. I've already proven it to myself." Gregory nodded slowly, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I know. And that's why I admire you even more." The exchange between them felt like the closing of a chapter, but it wasn't the end of Irene's story. It was just the beginning. She had come into this situation thinking she needed to win, thinking she needed to fit into a world that wasn't made for her. But now, she knew that her place in this world was something she could carve out on her own terms. She didn't need anyone's approval, not Gregory's, not anyone's. What mattered was that she had learned to believe in herself. The air felt lighter now, the weight that had once been on her shoulders lifting with each step she took. The maid, who had been watching from a distance, approached them again. She gave Irene a small nod, one of understanding. "You did it," she said, her voice quiet but full of pride. "You showed them all." Irene smiled at the maid, her heart full. She had shown them all. Not through flashy displays or grand gestures, but through simple, quiet strength. She had shown them the power of being true to herself. And in that moment, Irene knew that nothing else mattered. She had already won. Irene stood in the hallway, staring at the door she had just closed behind her. The soft murmur of voices from the event in the other room felt like a distant echo, as if she had stepped out of one world and into another. It was hard to process everything that had just happened. One moment, she had been part of the competition, trying to prove herself in a world she didn't belong to. The next, she had won not by playing the game, but by being true to herself. She felt a sense of quiet pride swelling within her, but also a quiet uncertainty. It wasn't about the black card, or the applause from the room full of people, it was about what came next. She had made it through this far, but now, she had to keep going. There was no turning back. She was different now, and she knew there was no going back to how things had been before. The maid had been right. The real test wasn't about what people could give her, but what she could give to herself. But as Irene walked down the hallway, she wasn't sure what that meant. What was next? What did she want now that she had found the strength to stand tall? Suddenly, Gregory's voice broke through her thoughts. "Irene," he called out, his voice echoing down the hallway. She turned to see him standing at the end, looking as if he had something important to say. His eyes were soft, no longer the calculating gaze he had when the competition had first begun. He looked at her with respect, and perhaps, a bit of wonder. "Can we talk?" he asked, taking a step toward her. Irene nodded, feeling a slight flutter in her chest. She hadn't expected to be asked to speak again, and certainly not so soon. But here he was, standing in front of her, ready to listen. She had spent so much time proving herself to him, but now it was time to hear him out. Gregory stopped a few feet away, taking a breath before he spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice steady. "About surviving, about being true to yourself." Irene listened carefully, her heart picking up its pace. "You were right," Gregory continued. "I spent so much of my life focused on wealth and status that I lost sight of what really matters. And then I met you. I saw something in you that I didn't expect." He paused, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. Irene felt the weight of his words, unsure of where this conversation would lead. "I admire your strength, Irene," Gregory said, his voice softer now. "But it's not just that. It's your heart. It's the way you don't try to hide who you are. I've been thinking a lot about that since you spoke." Irene shifted on her feet, her emotions mixed. She hadn't expected this kind of honesty from him. In fact, she hadn't expected him to acknowledge anything about her beyond the competition. "And I want to do something for you," Gregory added, as if reading her thoughts. "I want to help you, but not because I feel guilty or because you've won. I want to help because you've shown me a side of life I've been ignoring for too long." Irene looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But there was nothing there. He was being real with her. She didn't know how to feel about it. It was hard to accept help, especially when she had worked so hard to be independent. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. Gregory's eyes softened, and he stepped a little closer. "I want to help you build the future you've been dreaming of," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I know you've been doing everything on your own, and I respect that. But I can help you get to the next level. I can help you make those dreams a reality." Irene felt a rush of emotions wash over her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to accept help, but at the same time, the possibility of a future where she wasn't constantly fighting to survive was tempting. It was a choice she had never considered before. She had always assumed that she had to do everything by herself. But now, standing here with Gregory, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a sign of weakness to accept help, it was a sign of strength. "I'm not asking you to do this for me," Gregory said, as if sensing her hesitation. "I'm asking because I believe in you. I see something in you that others don't. And I want to help you succeed, on your own terms." Irene was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. She had never thought she would be in a position to receive anything from someone like him, let alone help with her future. But here it was, an offer she couldn't ignore. "I appreciate that," Irene finally said, her voice steady. "I really do. But I have to do this on my own. I've learned that much. What matters is that I stay true to myself." Gregory nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it," he said quietly. "But just know that if you ever change your mind, I'll be here." There was a weight to his words, but also a quiet respect. Irene felt a shift inside herself. She didn't need to accept his offer to be strong. She had already proven that. But the fact that he was offering, the fact that he saw her as more than just someone to compete with, made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. As she walked away from him, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. She had learned that much. And that was the greatest gift of all. Irene stood at the edge of the grand hallway, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights sparkled below her, a shimmering contrast to the quiet storm brewing inside her. It had been a week since the competition, since the moment she had proved to herself and to Gregory Harding that she didn't need to fit into anyone's expectations. She had thought that the weight of her struggles would lessen after the event, but it hadn't. If anything, it felt heavier now. She had gained something: respect, validation, but now, the question remained, what next? She had made it through the challenge, but she knew the world wasn't going to just hand her success on a silver platter. No one ever did that. She had learned that much from her own life. It wasn't enough to just survive. She needed to thrive. But thriving meant navigating this world she had barely scratched the surface of. The world of wealth, power, and connections that Gregory Harding inhabited, worlds apart from her own. The maid's words echoed in her mind: true power is in how we treat others, not in what we have. Irene closed her eyes for a moment, letting those words settle in. She didn't need the world's approval, but the world's reality had a way of seeping into your skin whether you wanted it to or not. She had come this far, but now she had to figure out what to do with it. Irene exhaled slowly and turned away from the window. She had spent so long fighting just to survive, but now it was time to figure out what it meant to truly live. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. She hadn't been expecting anyone, but when she opened it, there he was. Gregory Harding, standing in the doorway, looking like he had something on his mind. "Irene," he said quietly, his voice carrying that same sincerity she had heard the week before. "I know we didn't get a chance to really talk after the event. But I've been thinking a lot, and I wanted to offer you something more." Irene blinked, surprised to see him here. "What more is there?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart was beating faster. Gregory stepped into the room, his expression serious. "I've seen what you're capable of. And I want to help you make a real impact. I don't just mean through financial means, but through connections, opportunities that could help you do what you've always dreamed of." Irene wasn't sure what to feel. She had worked so hard to prove her worth without asking for anything, and now, here was Gregory offering to help her. But something inside her hesitated. Was she really ready to accept help from someone who came from such a different world? "Why me?" Irene asked, her voice quiet but direct. Gregory looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Because you're different. You've shown me something I didn't know I needed to see. You've shown me the power of being real, of standing up for what matters. It's rare, Irene. And I want to help you go further, to do more, to be more." His words struck something deep inside her. He wasn't offering just money or power. He was offering something far more valuable: opportunity. The opportunity to make a difference in her own life, and perhaps, in the lives of others. She had never had that before. But even as she stood there, a part of her held back. She didn't want to rely on anyone. She had fought too hard to be independent. What would that look like? Irene asked cautiously, trying to keep the skepticism out of her voice. Gregory took a step forward, his eyes intense. "I can open doors for you, Irene. I can help you build the foundation you need to make the changes you want. I know you have big dreams, dreams that don't just stop at surviving but aim to make an impact." Irene's thoughts swirled. She hadn't come this far just to hand her future over to someone else, no matter how generous the offer seemed. She needed to think. "I can't just take everything handed to me," she said, shaking her head slightly. "I've had to fight for everything I have. And I don't want to lose that fire." Gregory nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. And I'm not asking you to lose that fire. I'm asking you to use it, but with the tools that could help you build something bigger than you ever imagined." The silence in the room was thick, heavy with the weight of the decision she faced. Irene had always believed that if she worked hard enough, fought long enough, she could change her life on her own. She had done it before. But now, she realized something: sometimes, the right help at the right time could take that fight and turn it into something more powerful. Gregory wasn't asking her to change who she was. He wasn't asking her to forget her struggles. He was offering her the chance to make those struggles count. To turn her strength into something that could reach even farther than she ever thought possible. "What do you want from me?" Irene asked, her voice quieter now. Gregory's eyes met hers. "I want to see you succeed," he said simply. "I want to see you build something that's yours. Not because you're playing by anyone else's rules, but because you're creating your own." Irene thought about it for a long moment. She had worked hard for everything she had, and she wasn't going to throw that away. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to accept that help wasn't a weakness. It was a tool. "Okay," she said at last, her voice steady. "Let's see where this takes us." Gregory smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm glad," he said. "You're going to do great things, Irene. I believe that." Irene smiled back, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. She had made the decision. She wasn't going to just survive anymore. She was going to thrive. And with Gregory's help, she could start building that future today. Irene stood by the large conference room window, watching the city lights twinkle far below her. The skyline looked so vast, so full of possibility. A stark contrast to how she had felt when she first arrived: small, unsure, out of place. But now, after everything that had happened, she was beginning to feel like she might just belong here, in this world, alongside people who had once seemed untouchable. She thought about the offer Gregory had made her, and as the days passed, she felt a growing sense of purpose. He had opened doors for her, introduced her to powerful people, and given her a seat at the table. But Irene knew the real work was up to her. She wasn't just here to be a part of the crowd. She had bigger dreams, dreams that went beyond just being seen. She wanted to make an impact. She had always known that her story was meant for more than just survival. As Gregory had said, she was meant to thrive. But that wasn't as easy as it sounded. She wasn't just going to step into a world of privilege and have everything handed to her. She had to prove herself in ways that were still unfamiliar. And with every new opportunity, the stakes seemed higher. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She turned around, and there he was, Gregory, standing in the doorway with his usual calm demeanor. "Hey, Irene," he said, his voice warm. "Got a minute?" She nodded and waved him in, stepping away from the window. "Of course. What's up?" Gregory smiled as he stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He looked a little more serious than usual, and Irene immediately knew this was going to be a conversation that mattered. "I've been thinking," he started, his hands clasped in front of him. "You've been doing great. I've seen the way you handle everything. You've got something that not a lot of people have: real grit. But I also see the pressure you're under. You're still trying to find your footing, even with all the opportunities you've got now." Irene felt a lump form in her throat. She had been pushing herself so hard to prove that she belonged, but deep down, she knew he was right. The pressure was mounting, and there were moments when she wasn't sure if she was doing it all for the right reasons. "I know it's been a lot," Gregory continued. "But I don't want you to lose sight of what you're truly passionate about. What do you really want, Irene? Beyond all this, wealth, success, power? What's the one thing that matters most to you?" The question hit Irene like a wave. She had been so focused on the external markers of success, being seen, having influence, that she had almost forgotten why she started in the first place. She thought back to the days before all of this, to the quiet moments when she had dreamed of helping people like her, people who didn't have the same opportunities, who were stuck in cycles of poverty and struggle. "I want to help people," she said, her voice steady but with an intensity that surprised even her. "I want to give people like me the chance to rise up, to show that we have value. Not because of where we come from, but because of who we are." Gregory studied her, his expression thoughtful. "I thought that might be it," he said quietly. "And I think you're on the right path. But you don't have to do it alone, Irene. You don't have to carry the weight of it all yourself. Irene looked at him, unsure of what he meant.
What do you mean?
Gregory walked closer, his eyes locking with hers.
I mean that you've got the talent, the heart, and the drive. But sometimes, even the strongest people need support. You don't have to prove everything to the world by doing it on your own. There's a team of people behind you now, people who believe in you. People who want to see you succeed, not just for your own sake, but for the bigger picture. You can take those dreams of helping others and make them real.
Irene felt a sense of warmth spread through her chest. The idea of not having to do it all alone was freeing. She had spent so long thinking she had to fight every battle herself.
But maybe Gregory was right. Maybe she didn't have to carry the weight alone anymore.
You don't have to worry about proving anything to anyone anymore, Gregory added, his voice calm and reassuring.
You're already making an impact.
You've already shown the world that you're capable of more than anyone expected.
And now, it's time to show them what you're really made of.
Irene felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could stop it. She hadn't realized just how much she needed to hear those words. She had been so afraid of failing, so afraid of letting people down, that she hadn't taken the time to believe in herself. But now, she knew. She wasn't alone. She had a team behind her. And that team believed in her, too.
Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For believing in me.
Gregory smiled, his eyes soft.
Always, he said. You're not alone in this, Irene. You've got this.
Irene took a deep breath, feeling the weight on her shoulders lighten, just a little. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it.
She had a purpose now, a purpose that went beyond surviving. It was about thriving, and about making a difference.
And no matter how hard it got, no matter how many obstacles came her way, she was ready to rise. She was ready to take on the world, and this time, she wasn't doing it alone. Irene stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection that looked back at her.
She didn't recognize the person she saw anymore.
The young woman who had walked into this world full of doubts and insecurities was now someone stronger, someone ready to face whatever came next. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Gregory had kept his promise to help, and she had taken every opportunity he offered. Slowly, things were
starting to change.
She had made new connections, started new projects, and her confidence had grown with every step. But as much as things had changed, Irene knew she was only at the beginning of her journey. Her heart still carried the weight of the past, of all the struggles she had endured just to survive. She had learned so much, but there was still so much more to do. And so, standing there, looking at herself, Irene made a decision. She would continue to build, to grow, to push herself harder than ever before. But this time, she would do it on her terms. The doorbell rang, breaking her out of her thoughts. She quickly wiped away the single tear that had slipped down her cheek.
It wasn't sadness, it was determination.
She wasn't the same person she had been when she first met Gregory.
She was stronger, more focused.
She was ready. She opened the door to find Gregory standing there, as calm and collected as ever. But this time, there was something different in his eyes, a sense of pride, maybe.
Irene, he said with a smile. You've been busy, I see.
She returned the smile, a little sheepishly.
You could say that. I've been trying to get everything in place. Gregory nodded. I can see it. You've come a long way.
I couldn't have done it without your help, Irene said.
But I'm not stopping now. I've got a vision, Gregory. And I'm going to make it happen. Gregory's expression softened. I've always known you had it in you.
But what you've accomplished so far, it's impressive.
I'm proud of you, Irene.
The words felt like a weight lifted off her shoulders. She wasn't used to hearing that kind of praise. For so long, she had been used to fighting for everything, doing it all on her own. But now, she realized, she didn't have to fight alone. She had a team behind her, people who believed in her.
Thank you, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought I would hear you say that. But it means everything. Gregory gave her a nod, his smile growing wider. It's only the beginning. You've got the heart and the vision to change things, Irene. But don't forget, you've also got the resources now to make it happen. Irene felt a surge of gratitude, but also something else. A quiet resolve. She had spent so long wondering if she could make it, if she was good enough. And now, standing here with Gregory, she knew that she didn't need to wonder anymore. She was more than enough. I'm ready, she said, her voice strong. Let's make this happen. Gregory's eyes lit up. I knew you'd say that. You've got the right mindset, Irene. Now it's time to take the next step. The next step. Irene felt her heart race with excitement. This was it. This was the moment she had been working toward. She wasn't just going to survive anymore. She was going to make a difference. She was going to make her dreams real. Gregory stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway. Come on, he said, his voice full of confidence. Let's get to work. Irene followed him, her mind buzzing with possibility. As she walked down the hallway, she thought about everything that had led her to this moment, the struggles, the setbacks, the moments when she almost gave up. But now, none of that mattered. What mattered was what came next. What mattered was that she was finally taking control of her own future. She wasn't waiting for someone to hand her success. She was creating it herself. They stepped into the conference room, where several of Gregory's colleagues were already waiting. Irene took a deep breath, feeling the nerves settle. This was her moment, and she was ready for it. As she looked around the room, she felt a wave of determination wash over her. She wasn't just another face in the crowd anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. The meeting began, and as Gregory introduced her, Irene felt the weight of the moment. She was no longer the unsure young woman who had walked into this world. She was Irene, the woman who was going to make her dreams a reality. And she wasn't going to stop until she had built the future she had always wanted. The next chapter of her story had begun, and she was ready to write it. Irene sat in the meeting room, the conference table stretching out in front of her like an endless horizon. She had come so far from where she started, but as she looked around at the faces of Gregory's colleagues, some familiar, others new, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. The last few weeks had been a blur of introductions, meetings, and high-pressure moments, but now, sitting at the table, she knew this was her chance to prove everything she had been working toward. She wasn't just here by accident, she was here because she had earned her place. Her heart raced, but she steadied herself, remembering the quiet confidence she had learned to build. It wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. It wasn't about fitting in. It was about showing up, being herself, and trusting that she had something valuable to offer. As Gregory walked into the room, he gave her a reassuring nod, his presence steady and calming. All right, everyone, he said, standing at the front of the room. This is Irene. She's going to be leading our new initiative. The words hung in the air, and Irene felt the weight of them. Leading. She had always dreamed of leading, of making an impact, but hearing it spoken aloud by Gregory gave it a new sense of reality. She was no longer just someone who was given opportunities. She was someone who was taking charge of her future. The room fell silent for a moment, and Irene could feel the eyes on her, each one scrutinizing her every move. She had spent so long fighting for recognition, but now that she had it, the responsibility felt heavy. She was here to prove she could handle this, to show that she had what it took to lead. She took a deep breath, collected her thoughts, and stood up. Thank you, Gregory, Irene said, her voice calm but strong. I'm excited to be here and to work with all of you. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but I'm ready to take it on. I've spent my life trying to survive, but now, I'm here to thrive. And I believe that together, we can make something incredible happen. There was a slight pause, and then a few heads nodded in agreement. Some of the colleagues seemed skeptical, while others looked impressed. But it didn't matter to Irene. She wasn't here for approval. She was here to build something that would make a difference. As she spoke, she felt the weight of her past and her struggles starting to lift, replaced by the quiet strength that had grown inside her over the past few weeks.
She had learned that leadership wasn't about having all the answers, it was about the courage to take the next step, even when the path wasn't clear. Gregory smiled, clearly pleased with her response. "I knew you had it in you, Irene," he said. "This is just the beginning. I'm looking forward to seeing what you accomplish." Irene nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and determination. She wasn't just here to follow in anyone's footsteps, she was here to make her own mark, to create something that would help others rise, just as she had. The meeting continued, and Irene found herself contributing ideas, suggesting solutions, and finding common ground with Gregory's colleagues. The conversations were intense, but Irene was no longer the outsider. She was a part of this world now, a vital part of the team, and that feeling of belonging was more powerful than she could have ever imagined. As the meeting wrapped up, Gregory approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You did great," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I knew you could handle this." Irene smiled, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. "But this is just the beginning. I have big plans, and I'm not stopping now." Gregory chuckled. "That's the spirit. I'm glad you're with us, Irene. You're going to do amazing things." Irene watched as he walked away, her mind racing with possibilities. She had come a long way from that first day, from the girl who had walked into this world unsure of her place. Now, she was standing tall, ready to take on whatever came next. She wasn't just here to take part. She was here to lead. She had a vision, and with the right people by her side, she knew she could turn it into something real. As she left the meeting room, she walked with a new sense of purpose, the weight of the future ahead of her both exhilarating and empowering. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader, and nothing was going to stop her from reaching the heights she had always dreamed of. Irene sat alone in her office, the soft hum of the city outside barely registering in her mind. The past few weeks had been a blur of meetings, decisions, and new responsibilities, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had proven herself again and again, and yet there was a quiet longing deep within her that still hadn't been fulfilled. She had built something from nothing, a foundation that others were beginning to recognize, but now she realized that success didn't just come from achieving your goals. It came from having the right people alongside you, helping you along the way. The world she had entered was competitive, full of individuals with their own motives and ambitions. She knew that if she was going to truly make the impact she dreamed of, she couldn't do it alone. She needed a team, a group of people who shared her vision, who would fight alongside her to make that vision a reality. As she sat at her desk, deep in thought, the door to her office creaked open. Gregory walked in, his presence as commanding as ever, but today, there was a softness in his demeanor that she hadn't seen before. "Irene," he said, his voice calm. "How's everything going?" Irene looked up at him, a small smile crossing her face. "It's going well. The team's starting to come together, and the projects are moving forward. But there's something missing, Gregory." Gregory raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Irene leaned back in her chair, her hands folded in front of her. "I've been doing this on my own for a while now, but I can't keep doing everything myself. I need the right people around me, people who believe in what we're building. I can't just focus on the work, I need to build a community." Gregory nodded thoughtfully, taking his seat across from her. "I get it," he said after a moment. "And I think you're right. You've built something amazing here, but you're right, you can't do it all alone. But there's one thing I want to remind you of." Irene tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" Gregory's eyes met hers, his gaze steady and sure. "You've already done the hardest part," he said. "You've shown the world who you are, what you're capable of. The rest, building the team, expanding your reach, those are just the next steps. You've already earned your place here." Irene felt a wave of relief wash over her at his words. She had worked so hard, but in some ways, she still didn't feel like she truly belonged. Gregory's reassurance reminded her that she had already proven herself. She wasn't here because of luck or a favor. She was here because she had earned it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a lot to me."
Gregory smiled. I know what you're capable of, Irene. And I want to help you find the right people to help you take this even further. But remember, you don't have to rush it. You're building something that will last. The right team will come, and you'll know when it's the right fit. Irene nodded, feeling a renewed sense of clarity. She had spent so long focusing on the immediate, on the next step, the next challenge, but now, she realized, it wasn't just about moving forward quickly. It was about moving with intention. She wasn't looking for shortcuts. She was looking for the right partners, the right support. And when they came, it would help her build something that would last, something that would make a real difference. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, interviews, and team-building activities. Irene was careful in selecting those who would join her on this journey. She wasn't looking for yes-men or followers. She was looking for individuals who shared her vision, who brought their own strengths to the table, and who were willing to fight for something greater than themselves. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of interviews, Irene sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. She had done it. She had built the team. The people who would stand with her, who would help her carry this vision forward, were now in place. And as she looked around the room at the faces of the team she had assembled, Irene felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced before. This was what it meant to truly build something, to surround yourself with people who not only believed in you but believed in the dream. Gregory walked in just then, his smile wide as he took in the scene. I think we've got something here, he said. You've done it, Irene. This team, this is what success looks like. Irene stood up, meeting his gaze with a look of determination. This is just the beginning, she said, her voice filled with purpose. We've got a long way to go, but we're going to do it together. And together, we'll make this world a better place. Gregory nodded in agreement, his eyes reflecting the same vision she had for the future. I'm with you all the way, he said. Irene felt a quiet smile tug at her lips. This was what she had been waiting for. The right people, the right support, and the right vision. Now, it was time to make it all happen. And as she looked at the faces of her team, she knew that with them by her side, nothing was impossible. The future was theirs to build. Irene stood at the head of the conference table, her heart racing with excitement and a touch of nervousness. This was the moment. The team she had spent weeks building, the vision she had been working toward, was finally taking shape. The first major project she was leading was about to launch, and all eyes were on her. She glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of her colleagues. Each one of them had joined her on this journey, bringing their skills and passion to the table. She had handpicked them, one by one, and now, together, they were ready to make a difference. The energy in the room was electric. Everyone was eager to get started, but Irene could sense the pressure mounting. The stakes were high. The success of this project would define the next phase of her career, and she knew it. But as she looked at the faces of the people around her, she felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just about her. This was about all of them, working together toward a common goal. All right, Irene said, her voice steady, but with a spark of determination. We've come a long way to get here, but now it's time to move forward. We've got one shot at this, and I'm confident we're going to knock it out of the park. Let's make sure everything is in place and that we're all on the same page. The team nodded, their expressions full of focus. They were ready. Irene had done everything she could to prepare them, but now it was time to see if they could execute the plan. They had spent hours brainstorming, perfecting every detail, and making sure nothing was overlooked. It was a challenge, but one that Irene knew they could handle. She wasn't alone anymore. She had built a team of people who believed in her vision, and now it was up to them to bring it to life. Let's break down our priorities, Irene continued. First, we need to ensure that our messaging is clear and impactful. Our target audience needs to know exactly what we're offering, and we can't afford any confusion. Second, the logistics. We've got the timeline set, but we need to stick to it. Any delays could jeopardize everything. And lastly, customer engagement. We need to make sure that our audience feels connected to our brand, that they believe in our mission.
Her team members, some of whom were specialists in marketing, logistics, and customer relations, began discussing the finer details of each section. Irene watched them work, her mind buzzing with ideas and solutions. It wasn't just about leading the team, it was about listening to them, collaborating with them, and ensuring that everyone had a voice in the process. As the meeting progressed, Irene felt a wave of pride wash over her. This was what she had always wanted, to be part of something bigger than herself, to lead with purpose and passion, to create something that had the potential to change lives. The road to this moment hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. After the meeting ended, Irene lingered for a few moments, watching her team as they packed up their things and prepared to go back to their tasks. They were all moving with purpose, each of them energized by the challenge ahead. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had built this, that she had brought these people together to make a difference. But there was still work to be done. The project was just beginning, and she knew that it would take all of them, working together, to make it a success. Later that day, Irene received an unexpected call from Gregory. She picked up the phone, a little surprised, but happy to hear his voice. "Irene," he said, his tone warm. "I just wanted to check in and see how everything's going. I know today is a big day for you." Irene smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's going well," she said. "We've got the plan in motion, and the team is really coming together. I'm proud of what we've accomplished so far, but I know we still have a lot of work ahead of us." Gregory's voice was filled with admiration. "I knew. You had it in you. You've come a long way, and I'm proud of you, Irene. But remember, no matter what happens, this isn't just about one project. It's about the bigger picture. You're building something lasting, something that's going to make a real difference." Irene felt a lump form in her throat at his words. It had been a long, difficult journey, and hearing him truly say that, was everything she had ever needed to hear. "Thank you, Gregory," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." Gregory chuckled softly. "You've earned it, Irene. Now, go out there and show the world what you're capable of." Irene hung up the phone, her heart swelling with pride. She had come so far, and now, with her team behind her, she was ready to take on whatever challenges came next. As she looked out the window at the city below, she knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. She wasn't just leading a project, she was building a legacy, one that would help others rise, just as she had. And nothing was going to stop her from achieving it. Irene stood in front of the large floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city as the sun set, casting a warm orange glow over everything. The past few months had been a whirlwind. The project had launched, and now the results were starting to pour in. The numbers were good, better than good. But it wasn't just the success that made Irene feel fulfilled, it was the realization that she had done something bigger than just create a profitable project. She had built a team, a community of people who believed in her vision and who were now contributing to something that would change lives. The weight of it all settled into her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel proud. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was thriving. And she knew that this success wasn't just a result of her hard work, it was the culmination of everything she had learned along the way. She had faced so many obstacles and challenges, but each one had shaped her, taught her something new. And now, standing here, with the city sprawling beneath her, she realized that the journey was just as important as the destination. She had learned to trust herself, to take risks, to lead with compassion, and to build something that would last. It wasn't just about business or making money, it was about making a difference. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. She glanced down at the screen and saw Gregory's name. She smiled and answered the call. "Hey, Gregory," she said, her voice warm. "How's everything going?" "Irene," Gregory's voice came through, strong and steady. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling. I know it's been a busy few weeks, but you've been doing incredible work. How are you holding up?" Irene paused for a moment, considering his question. She had been so focused on pushing forward, on ensuring everything was running smoothly, that she hadn't taken much time to reflect. But now, hearing Gregory's voice, she realized just how far she had come. "I'm doing well," she said, her voice steady.
It's been a lot of work, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I feel like everything is finally falling into place. Gregory's tone softened. I knew you could do it, Irene. You've built something remarkable here, and I think the best part is just beginning. But remember, it's okay to take a step back, to breathe for a moment. You've earned it. Irene smiled, the sincerity in Gregory's voice making her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. She had been so caught up in the rush of success that she hadn't allowed herself to pause and appreciate what she had achieved. Thanks, she said quietly. I think I needed to hear that. There was a moment of silence before Gregory spoke again. Irene, I know you've been working hard, and I know you're focused on the future. But don't forget to celebrate this moment. You've built something that's going to change lives, and that's not something everyone gets to say. Take a minute, appreciate what you've done. Irene looked out at the city below, the weight of his words settling in her heart. She had spent so much time focused on the next step, the next challenge, that she hadn't taken the time to reflect on how far she had come. She wasn't just leading a successful project, she was building a legacy. And that was something worth celebrating. You're right, Irene said, her voice softer now. I've been so focused on what's next that I haven't taken a moment to appreciate everything we've done. I guess I'll take that advice to heart. Good, Gregory replied, a smile in his voice. And remember, this is just the beginning. You've set the foundation for something incredible, and the impact you're going to have will be far-reaching. I'm proud of you, Irene. Irene felt a swell of emotion rise in her chest at his words. She had worked so hard to prove herself, to show that she belonged, and now, for the first time, she felt like she had truly made her mark. Thank you, Gregory, she said, her voice thick with gratitude. That means a lot to me. The conversation turned to other topics, but Irene couldn't help but think about the road that had led her here. She had come from a place of uncertainty, of fighting just to survive, and now she was standing at the forefront of something she had created, something that would leave a lasting impact. The next phase was ahead of her, but she knew that she wasn't alone anymore. She had the right people by her side, and together, they would continue to build, to grow, and to make a difference. As the call ended, Irene sat back in her chair, a sense of peace settling over her. She had proven that she could rise, that she could succeed, and most importantly, that she could lead with heart. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, she was ready for whatever came next. Irene sat quietly at her desk, staring out of the large window at the sprawling city beneath her. The skyline glittered in the distance, but her mind was focused on something much deeper than the view. The last few months had been a whirlwind, and as much as she had grown, there were moments when she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choices. She had been working relentlessly, building, leading, and achieving things she once thought were beyond her reach. But even with all her progress, there were days when she questioned if it was enough. Was it really her calling to lead this massive project? Was she ready for the responsibility of changing so many lives? As Irene pondered these questions, her phone buzzed on the desk, snapping her out of her thoughts. She picked it up to find a message from Gregory, Irene, I think it's time we take the next step. We've reached a new milestone, and it's time to move forward. Are you ready? She felt a spark of excitement run through her, but it was quickly followed by a wave of doubt. The next step. She had come so far, but was she truly ready for what came next? She thought back to when she first started, when the weight of the world had felt so heavy on her shoulders. Back then, she had no idea what the future would hold. She had no idea if she would succeed or fail. And now, here she was, standing at the edge of something even bigger. But with it came even more uncertainty. Irene stood up from her desk and walked to the window. The cool breeze from the open window brushed against her face, and she closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to breathe deeply. She had faced so many challenges already. She had proven herself, time and time again. But now, it was time to prove something even bigger, to prove that she was capable of not just surviving, but thriving in a world that had once seemed out of reach. She had built this from nothing, and now it was time to make her vision a reality. There was no turning back. As she sent a quick reply to Gregory, I'm ready. Let's do this.
She felt a surge of purpose flood through her. She had been given this opportunity not just by chance, but because she had earned it. She had worked tirelessly to get to this point. And now, she would give it everything she had. A few days later, Irene and her team gathered in the sleek, modern conference room, ready to take the next step in their journey. The air was thick with anticipation. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the launch of their next major initiative. As Irene entered the room, she saw the faces of her team, each one filled with determination. They had come a long way, but Irene knew this was the most important step yet. She took a deep breath, preparing herself. This time, there was no room for doubt. "All right, everyone," Irene said, her voice steady, filled with confidence. "We've worked hard to get here. Now it's time to put everything we've learned into action. We've got a chance to make something truly impactful, and it's all in our hands." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "We've faced challenges before, and we've overcome them. But this is the real test. Are we ready to take it to the next level?" The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling on everyone. Then, one by one, her team members nodded, their eyes full of belief. Irene could feel it. They were ready. Together, they would make it happen. The meeting began, and as Irene led the discussion, she felt herself grow more and more confident. This was her moment. This was her chance to show not just her team, but the world, what they were capable of. She wasn't just here to lead a project, she was here to make a lasting impact. After the meeting, Irene found herself alone in the room, her thoughts swirling. It had been a long day, but she knew that this was only the beginning. As she sat at the conference table, her mind wandered back to the early days, when she had felt so uncertain, so out of place. She had always wondered if she belonged, if she was truly cut out for this world. But now, she knew. She wasn't just part of this world, she was shaping it. She had earned her place at the table. And as she looked around the room, she could see the faces of the people who had been there with her from the start. Her team. Her family. They had made it this far together, and they would keep going, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Irene smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. She wasn't just leading. She was living her purpose. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Irene knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The future was waiting, and she was ready to face it head-on. Irene stood at the edge of the rooftop, the wind tugging at her hair, her thoughts swirling like the city below her. It had been a few months since the major project launched, and though everything appeared to be moving in the right direction, something felt off. She had reached a point where success no longer felt like a guarantee, it felt like a constant challenge. The weight of it was more than she had anticipated. As much as she had built a solid team, as much as the numbers were in her favor, there was always the nagging fear of failure, the fear that everything she had worked for could crumble at any moment. She thought back to the early days when she had fought for every inch of success, when she had been so determined to prove herself. She had done it. She had made it. But now that she was here, at the top of this mountain, she realized that the climb didn't stop once you reached the peak. It was a never-ending journey. And that realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I thought it would be easier once I got here," she muttered to herself, staring out at the horizon. "But I guess that's never the way it works." Just as she was lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a work-related message, but it was Gregory. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hey," she said, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "How's it going?" Gregory's voice came through the phone, calm but with an underlying concern. "Irene, I wanted to check in. I know you've been pushing yourself hard lately, and I wanted to see how you're doing. You're taking on a lot, and I just want to make sure you're not burning yourself out." Irene smiled weakly, but she appreciated his concern. Gregory had always been there, offering support and advice when she needed it. "I'm fine," she said, though she knew she was far from it. "It's just a lot. There's so much more to do, and I'm not sure I'm handling it the way I should." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Gregory spoke again, his voice softer this time.
Irene, you've already done more than most people could ever dream of.
You've built something incredible from nothing.
But it's okay to step back and take a breath. You don't have to carry everything on your own. Irene took a deep breath, allowing Gregory's words to sink in.
She had always been so focused on the next step, always striving for more, that she had forgotten to take a moment to appreciate what she had already
accomplished. I know, she said quietly.
I guess I've just been afraid that if I stop for even a second, everything will fall apart.
Gregory's response was gentle but firm. You've built a strong foundation, Irene.
You've built a team, a community, and they're here to support you.
You don't have to be the one to do it all.
Irene closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of his words finally sinking in. She had spent so much time trying to carry the burden alone, believing that her success depended on her doing everything herself.
But Gregory was right. She didn't have to do it all.
She had people around her now who believed in her, who were there to help her carry the load.
I guess I've been afraid of failing, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of letting everyone down. Gregory's voice softened even more. You're not alone in this, Irene. You've built something that will outlast any one person. And the truth is, failure isn't the end.
It's just part of the process. What matters is how you handle it, how you learn from it, and how you grow.
Irene's heart lifted slightly.
She had been so focused on perfection, on never showing weakness, that she had forgotten that failure wasn't something to fear, it was something to learn from. She had failed before, and she would fail again, but that didn't mean she was doomed to collapse. It meant she was learning, evolving, and growing stronger.
Thank you, Gregory, she said, her voice more certain now. I needed to hear that.
There was a brief silence before Gregory spoke again.
You've got this, Irene. You always have. Irene smiled softly. I'm starting to believe that. I'll figure it out. I know I can't do everything alone, but I can rely on the people I trust.
Exactly, Gregory said, his voice filled with pride.
And remember, you don't have to be perfect. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time.
After the call ended, Irene stood there for a moment, looking out over the city again. The weight she had been carrying suddenly felt lighter.
She wasn't in this alone.
She had a team, a community, and people who believed in her. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she didn't have to have all the answers right.
Now.
The journey was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever came next.
She wasn't just surviving anymore.
She was thriving, and she would continue to thrive, step by step, day by day. And with the support of those around her, there was nothing she couldn't accomplish. Irene stood at the entrance of the new office building, her mind racing as she looked up at the sleek glass structure before her. This moment felt like the culmination of everything she had worked for: the late nights, the challenges, the doubts, and the small victories that had slowly built up to this very moment. She had come a long way since that first day when she walked into the corporate world unsure of her place. Now, standing in front of the building that represented not just her success but the success of the entire team she had carefully built, she couldn't help but feel a wave of pride. Her journey had been full of unexpected twists, but each one had led her here, to this point where she could finally say that she had made it.
But with that pride also came a deep sense of responsibility.
The stakes had never been higher. She wasn't just representing herself anymore, she was representing the dreams of everyone who had joined her on this path. She thought back to the early days, to the first project that had put her on the map, and how she had felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Back then, she was so focused on proving herself to the world, to everyone who had ever doubted her, that she didn't allow herself to pause and appreciate how far she had come. Now, though, she knew that the real challenge wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about staying true to the values that had brought her this far and continuing to inspire her team to believe in the vision they had collectively created. This is it, Irene whispered to herself. She could hear the bustling sounds of the city around her, but for a brief moment, it felt like time had slowed. She wasn't just looking at the building in front of her, she was looking at the future, at everything that lay ahead. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore.
This was where she belonged. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped forward, walking through the revolving doors of the building with a newfound confidence. As she made her way up to the top floor where the executive team had gathered for the meeting, her thoughts began to focus again. This meeting was crucial. It wasn't just another presentation, this was the moment that would define their next big move. She had to make sure that everyone saw what she saw, the endless potential, the growth, the future of the company. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out into the sleek, modern conference room. A large table sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by the faces of those who had supported her from the beginning, Gregory included. The tension in the air was palpable, but Irene's calm presence was enough to steady the room. As she walked to the head of the table, her team members greeted her with nods and smiles, a clear sign of their respect and admiration. Irene had earned this position, and she wasn't about to let fear or doubt stop her now. "All right, everyone," Irene began, her voice steady and clear, filled with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was prepared. "We've come a long way to get to this point, and now we're about to take it to the next level. This is our moment to make an impact on a scale we've never seen before. We've done the groundwork, we've built the foundation, and now it's time to put our plan into action." The room was quiet as everyone listened closely, their attention fully on Irene. She could feel the weight of the moment, but it didn't make her nervous. If anything, it fueled her fire. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for, everything her team had worked for. "This project," Irene continued, "isn't just about the numbers. It's about creating something meaningful, something that will last. We're not just going after profits. We're building a legacy, one that will leave an impact on the industry, on the people who use our products, and on the lives we touch along the way." She paused for a moment, looking around the table at each person's face. She could see the commitment, the belief in the mission, and it strengthened her resolve. "But we can't do this alone. This success isn't just mine. It's ours. Every person here plays a part, and every person here will help push us forward. We've faced challenges before, and we will face more in the future. But I believe in this team. I believe in all of you." The team members exchanged looks of affirmation, their faces lighting up with renewed energy. Irene knew that they believed in her just as much as she believed in them. She had never felt so sure of the path ahead. As she wrapped up the meeting, the sense of unity in the room was undeniable. They had a shared vision, a common goal, and now, with everything in place, it was time to execute. The next phase of their journey was just beginning, but Irene knew that they were ready. They were a team. They were a force. And together, they would take on whatever challenges came their way, continuing to build and grow in ways they never thought possible. As the meeting ended and everyone filed out of the room, Irene lingered for a moment, looking out the window at the city below. It was a beautiful sight, but more than that, it was a reminder of how far she had come. The city had once felt like a daunting, overwhelming place, but now, it felt like home. She had earned her place here, and she was ready for whatever came next. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, and she would continue to thrive, no matter what. Irene sat at her desk, the soft glow of the late afternoon sun streaming in through the window. The office was quiet now, the usual buzz of activity fading as the day wound down. But Irene couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had everything she had once dreamed of: a success, recognition, a team that respected her, but still, there was a nagging feeling that lingered in the back of her mind. She had always believed that when she reached the top, everything would fall into place. That once she had achieved her goals, everything would make sense. But now, she realized, the journey was far from over. The weight of leadership was heavy, and while she had built something remarkable, she knew that the real challenge was maintaining it. The pressure of making the right decisions, staying ahead of the competition, and keeping her team motivated was always on her mind. The responsibility had never been so real. She wasn't just leading a project anymore, she was responsible for the people who depended on her, for the future they were all working toward. As Irene leaned back in her chair, she thought about the conversations she had with Gregory, the moments when he reassured her that she had what it took to succeed, that she was more than capable of handling the pressure.
But lately, she had started to question whether she truly had it all under control. Her phone buzzed, breaking her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Gregory, Irene, let's meet tomorrow. I have some important things to discuss. I think it's time we talk about the next big step for you. Irene stared at the message for a moment. She had a feeling she knew where this conversation was headed, and part of her felt both excited and anxious. It was time for the next phase, the next challenge. She had spent so much time building, but now it seemed like Gregory was ready to push her even further. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but deep down, she knew that she had no choice but to rise to the occasion. The next day, Irene met Gregory at a trendy cafe just outside the city center. As soon as she walked in, she spotted him sitting at a table by the window, a look of quiet determination on his face. He smiled when he saw her, standing up to greet her with a firm handshake. Irene, he said, his voice warm. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Irene smiled back, though she could feel the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. I'm doing well, she replied. Busy, but that's nothing new. They both sat down, and Gregory wasted no time getting to the point. I've been thinking a lot about your future, Irene, he said, his eyes focused. You've accomplished so much, but I think it's time to push yourself even further. It's time to think bigger, to make a real impact on the industry. Irene felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had already come so far, and now Gregory was asking her to push beyond even that. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Gregory leaned forward, his eyes full of purpose. I'm talking about taking your vision to a global scale, he said. You've built something incredible here, but the potential is so much bigger. I want you to think about expanding beyond what you've already done. You're not just a leader anymore, Irene. You're on the cusp of becoming a game changer in this industry. It's time to think about the legacy you're leaving. Irene's heart raced. A global scale? She had always dreamed big, but this was a different level. It felt like a massive leap, one that could either make her or break her. But deep down, she knew Gregory was right. She had the foundation, the team, and the drive to take on something this big. It was just a matter of deciding if she was ready to take that leap. I don't know, Irene said quietly, her hands resting on the table. It's a huge step. What if I fail? What if I can't live up to the expectations? Gregory smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. Failure is part of the process, Irene. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and moving forward. You've already proven yourself. You've built something that's changing lives, and that's only the beginning. You've got the ability to take it further than you ever imagined. Irene stared at him for a long moment, taking in his words. He believed in her, he believed in her vision, her potential, and her ability to lead. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to start believing in herself the way he believed in her. She had come so far, and now, this was the next step. The next challenge. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of it all settle in. Okay, she said finally, her voice steady and confident. Let's do it. Let's take it to the next level. Gregory's smile widened. I knew you'd say that. You've got this, Irene. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way. Irene felt a surge of determination fill her. She wasn't just leading anymore. She was creating something that would last, something that would change the course of an entire industry. And with Gregory by her side, she knew they could do it. As they left the cafe and walked into the bustling streets of the city, Irene couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement for what was to come. She was ready. Ready for the challenges, the risks, and the rewards. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving, and the future was wide open, waiting for her to make her mark. Irene sat at her desk late that night, the soft hum of the city below her barely audible over the steady tapping of her keyboard. She had been working nonstop for the past few days, reviewing reports, making final adjustments to the new project, and preparing for the big presentation the next morning. She had already come so far, but this was the moment that could truly define her future. The pressure felt heavier than ever. She had been given the opportunity to take the company to a global level, to turn her vision into something that would change the industry. And yet, with every step she took, the weight of responsibility only seemed to grow. She thought back to when she first started, when she was just trying to survive, just trying to prove she belonged. Now, she was trying to prove that she could handle everything, that she could lead with the same passion and determination that had gotten her this far. But the truth was, the fear of failure was still there. It had always been there, lurking in the back of her mind, whispering doubts into her ears. What if she wasn't enough? What if she couldn't live up to the expectations? What if all of this fell apart? She let out a sigh, closing her eyes for a moment and rubbing her temples. It was all so overwhelming, and she didn't know if she was ready for what lay ahead. But as the minutes passed, she realized something important. She wasn't in this alone. She had built a team of people who believed in her and in the vision they were creating together. They had faced challenges, and they had come out stronger each time. And as much as she doubted herself, she knew that her team didn't doubt her. They were counting on her, just as much as she was counting on them. Irene took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She wasn't just leading a company anymore, she was building something that would leave a legacy. The next morning, as the presentation approached, Irene stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her suit and trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She had done everything she could to prepare, but now it was time to deliver. She wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was representing her team, her vision, and everything they had worked for. The room was filled with people, investors, executives, and industry leaders, all eager to hear what she had to say. Irene stood at the front of the room, the spotlight on her as the murmurs of conversation slowly faded into silence. She could feel the eyes on her, waiting for her to speak. For a moment, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, but then she remembered the support of her team. She wasn't alone in this. "Good morning, everyone," Irene began, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you for being here today. What we're about to show you is more than just a project, it's the future of our industry. It's a vision that we've worked tirelessly to bring to life, and we believe it will change the way the world thinks about what's possible." She paused for a moment, letting her words settle in. She could see the skeptical expressions in the crowd, the people who were waiting for her to prove herself. But she wasn't intimidated. She had earned this moment, and she wasn't going to back down now. This project isn't just about numbers or profits. It's about creating something that will have a lasting impact on the people who use our products, the communities we serve, and the world at large. We're not just looking at the bottom line, we're looking at how we can change lives for the better. And I believe that this project has the power to do that. Irene's confidence grew with every word, her passion for the project radiating out to the room. She had been afraid of failing, but now, as she spoke, she realized that this was what she had been working for all along. This was her chance to make a difference. This was her legacy. The room was silent as she continued, her voice filled with conviction. "We've built something strong, something that has the potential to grow beyond anything we've ever imagined. But none of this would be possible without the team behind me. We've all worked together to make this vision a reality, and I couldn't be more proud of what we've accomplished. But this is just the beginning. The next step is to take this project to a global level, to make a real impact that will last for generations." Irene paused again, scanning the room. She could feel the shift. The skepticism was fading, replaced with a new energy, one of curiosity, of belief. They were starting to see what she saw. "I know that the road ahead won't be easy," she continued. "But I also know that we have the people, the resources, and the determination to make it happen. We're not just changing the game, we're rewriting the rules." She finished her presentation, and the room sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the room. Irene felt a rush of relief and pride. She had done it. She had proven that she could lead, that she could deliver on the promises she had made. But more than that, she had shown that she was ready for whatever came next. As the meeting wrapped up, Irene stepped out into the hallway, her heart racing with excitement. She had faced her fears, and she had succeeded. The future was bright, and she knew that, with her team by her side, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. Irene smiled to herself as she looked out at the city skyline once again. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Irene stood in the lobby of the new global office, watching as her team moved around her, preparing for another crucial phase of the project. The glass walls reflected the hustle and bustle of the city outside, but inside, the focus was on something much bigger. The last few months had been filled with incredible highs and frustrating lows, but here she was on the edge of something monumental. She could feel the weight of the responsibility, but she was no longer overwhelmed by it. She had grown, not just in her career, but as a leader, as a person. The fears that once kept her up at night, the doubts about whether she could live up to the expectations, had started to fade. The moment she had feared was now behind her, and the future lay ahead, open and full of possibility. She glanced over at Gregory, who was talking with a few of the senior executives. He had been her mentor, her guide, and more than anything, her biggest supporter throughout this journey. He had always believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. And now, as the pieces began to fall into place, she knew that the foundation they had built together was strong enough to carry them through whatever came next. As Irene watched the team working together, she felt a sense of gratitude for what they had accomplished. Every late night, every challenge, every obstacle had brought them closer together. This team, this family she had built, was what made the dream possible. They weren't just co-workers, they were partners in something that could change the world. Irene, Gregory's voice broke her out of her thoughts. She turned to see him approaching, a warm smile on his face. "It's time," he said. "Are you ready?" Irene nodded, a spark of determination lighting up her eyes. "I've been ready for a while now," she said. "Let's do this." Together, they walked toward the conference room, where the final presentations would take place. Irene felt a rush of excitement as they entered the room. Her team was already seated, preparing for what would be the most important meeting of their careers. The stakes had never been higher, but Irene knew this was what they had been working for. She was no longer just a part of the company's success, she was shaping its future. As she took her seat at the head of the table, she looked around at her team, each one of them focused, committed, and ready for what was to come. This moment was theirs as much as it was hers. She stood, the room falling silent as everyone turned their attention to her. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady and confident. "This project, this vision, it's not just mine. It's all of ours. We've built something extraordinary together, and today, we take it to the next level. What we're about to present isn't just an idea. It's a movement. A movement that will change the way the world looks at what we do." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. "We've faced challenges. We've overcome obstacles. But none of that compares to the opportunity we have in front of us now. This is our moment to shine, to show the world that we are more than capable of making this vision a reality." The team nodded in agreement, their energy palpable. Irene felt the rush of adrenaline course through her. She had done it. She had led them to this point, and now it was time for them to take the next step. The meeting began, and as Irene presented the plan, she felt the confidence that had been building inside her for so long finally come to the surface. She wasn't just presenting numbers or ideas. She was presenting a dream that had the power to change everything. She knew there would be questions, there would be doubts, but she was ready for it. She had prepared for this moment, and she had the answers. As she finished the presentation, Irene looked around the room. The faces of the executives were thoughtful, some nodding in agreement, others silently considering the next steps. Gregory gave her a small, approving smile, and for a brief moment, she felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. The room fell silent, and Irene waited, knowing that the final decision was about to be made. The CEO, a seasoned leader with years of experience, finally spoke. "Irene, what you've presented today is nothing short of impressive. You've shown us not just the potential for growth, but the heart behind it. This is exactly what we need to take our company to the next level.
We're in.
Irene felt a wave of relief wash over her.
It was official. The plan had been accepted. She had done it. She had led them to this moment. But more than that, she had proven to herself that she was capable of achieving everything she had ever dreamed of. As the room erupted into applause, Irene looked over at her team. They were smiling, high-fiving, and exchanging congratulatory words, but in that moment, Irene couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't just her victory. It was their victory. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had a team that had been with her every step of the way. As the meeting wrapped up, Irene stepped out of the room, a smile on her face and a sense of accomplishment in her heart. This was the beginning of something bigger than she had ever imagined. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was only just starting. But she was ready for it. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading. And she knew that with her team by her side, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. Irene stood at the balcony of the building, looking out over the city that had witnessed her rise. The skyline stretched out before her, a symbol of everything she had accomplished and everything still to come. It had been a year since that pivotal meeting where she and her team had taken the leap, deciding to push beyond the limits they had once set for themselves. The challenges had been relentless, but so had their drive. She had faced doubts, both from others and from within herself, but now, as she stood here, looking at the city from a place she had earned, she felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long, and there had been moments when she questioned if she was on the right path. She remembered the days when she felt like an outsider, unsure if she truly belonged in the world she was building. But every step had led her here, every late night, every meeting, every decision had brought her closer to this moment. And now, she could say without hesitation that she was exactly where she needed to be. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to see Gregory walking toward her, a smile on his face. "I was wondering if I'd find you out here," he said, his voice carrying the warmth and confidence that had been a constant throughout their journey together. Irene smiled, her heart light. "I just needed a moment to reflect," she said. "It's hard to believe how far we've come." Gregory nodded. "I know what you mean. But you've done more than just build something successful, Irene. You've built a legacy. And that's something most people only dream of." Irene turned back to the city, her gaze lingering on the horizon. "I never set out to build a legacy," she said quietly. "I just wanted to make a difference. To prove that we could create something bigger than ourselves." Gregory stepped beside her, looking out over the city as well. "And you've done exactly that. You've built something that will last, something that will inspire others to do the same." Irene felt a swell of pride in her chest. The feeling of having accomplished something meaningful, something lasting, was overwhelming in the best way. "I couldn't have done it without the team," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We've all worked so hard, and everyone's contributions have been vital to our success." Gregory smiled. "It's a testament to your leadership. You brought the right people together and inspired them to believe in your vision. And look at what you've achieved." Irene felt a quiet humility as she reflected on their journey. She had always been driven, always determined to prove herself. But she realized that her success was not just about her own efforts, it was about the collective strength of the people who had stood by her side, who had believed in the mission, and who had fought just as hard as she had. As they stood there in silence, watching the city pulse with life below them, Irene realized how much she had grown. She had come to the city as someone searching for her place, uncertain and unsure. But now, she was a leader, not just in title, but in spirit. She had built something that was bigger than herself. And she had done it with integrity, with heart, and with a team that shared her vision. "I never thought I'd get here," Irene said softly, breaking the silence. "But now that I'm here, I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Gregory placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with pride. "You've earned every step of it, Irene. And this is just the beginning. You've set the stage for a future that's even brighter than what we've already built." Irene smiled, her heart full of hope for what the future would bring. I'm ready for whatever comes next, she said, her voice steady and confident. And I know that we'll continue to make a difference, together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a warm, golden light, Irene felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long, but every challenge had led her to this point. She wasn't just a leader, she was part of something much bigger. And with the team by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, continuing to push boundaries and change the world one step at a time.